Historically dominant. That is what you can say for the UConn Huskies in the past two NCAA tournaments, resulting in two consecutive national championships. The first school to do that in men's college hoops since Florida in 2006 and 07. We've talked a lot about UConn in the grandeur and the pantheon of college basketball, and we'll continue to do that here in this opening hour live on a Tuesday on the early line. But let's break down the game last night in the national championship out in Phoenix. It was a game, DRS, that we all really hoped for when the field of 68 was revealed. UConn, the reigning champs and the one seed in the East region. On the left side of the bracket, Purdue, the redemption tour, the one seed in the Midwest region on the right side of the bracket. When the bracket was unveiled, it was a thought, could we get to this point to see 1 versus 1? Just the 10th ever national championship game in the history of the Big Dance to be 1 versus 1 for a title on the line. Connecticut dominant once again. They win by 15 points and really started to pull away in the second half. When they led by 6 at the break, I asked our guys live on our Bracket Central set last night, DRS, is it really just a 6-point margin, or does it feel like double digits because this is UConn? Ultimately, it would be double digits for the 12th consecutive game. They cover as a 6.5-point favorite, a total that worked its way down throughout Monday afternoon into the evening hours. 143 and a hook does stay under.
Yeah, it was interesting to take a look at also because you were looking at the game flow itself and wondering how fast that tempo would be. And for myself, I said, you know what? Two teams that don't have incredible tempo, but also at the same time, UConn can play at any tempo you want. You want to go up against Alabama, we'll drop over 80 points.
Right.
You want to play a slow-down pace, we can certainly do that. You wanted to take a look at Purdue coming into this game, knowing that they're sort of the same team. Pushing the tempo, not really their style, getting very good offensive looks because you have a balanced sheet here. 4 guards that can play and also a big man that can sort of dictate things when it goes down low. What I mean by dictate is double teams, triple teams, kicking out to open looks. It makes everybody's job so much easier. But my takeaway from the game overall itself, though, Zach Edey was phenomenal. And I always like to point out, because I did like UConn yesterday at -6.5. I did like the under in that. But I look forward to saying, well, Donnie, how did you handicap that game? I thought UConn was the better team and would win by margin. If they won the game, they usually win by double digits. But I thought Zach Edey would be slowed down. Did I think he would get 15, 14, 13 points? No. But somewhere around 20 points here would say, you know what, Klingon's going to be absolutely fantastic on defense. And he was solid. Edey was awesome last night. 37 points, 15 of 25, which included 7 of 12 from the free throw line. Then if you would have told me before the game I was going to get that type of approach from Purdue to be steady and Edey was going to dominate that way and also in efficient fashion, I actually would think Purdue's cutting down the nets today, and they were the national champion. It shows how good UConn was, but I just wanted to show respect where we were always wondering about Purdue, the outside cast for them.
Right.
But at the same time, what could Edey do against a dominant big who's great on defense? Phenomenal Edey was.
And we'll reflect on Purdue's run here in the NCAA tournament. They had to get rid of the demons. They had to exercise those ghosts from the past of being a 1 seed a season ago, getting knocked off by a 16 seed. They were trying to change a narrative in West Lafayette for this program overall. Could they get to a Final Four? Something the Boilermakers had failed to do in more than 4 decades. And again, we'll reflect on the career of Zach Edey and this year's Purdue team in what this group, despite coming up short by 15 points in a national championship, means to Purdue basketball. But when you focus on the game, Dan Hurley said so after the game, and maybe he said so after Zach Edey goes off for 37 of Purdue's 60 points, but he was very cut and dry. We thought that would be the case. There was a reason we did not double when Donovan Clingan was guarding Zach Edey, and Clingan got into foul trouble. The backup reserve in terms of Samson Johnson also got into foul trouble. We saw late at the end, Zach Edey just fill up the point sheet because he was going up against Alex Caravan. But Dan Hurley made it very clear. Zach Edey is going to get his. His points prop was 22.5. He skies over with a 37-point performance. Only 10 boards, his fewest in all 6 games in the NCAA tournament for the Boilermakers. But Dan Hurley said, we know Zach Edey is probably good for 25 and 10. But if we can hold down the rest of the supporting staff, guys like Braden Smith, guys like Fletcher Lawyer, Mason Gillis, Lance Jones, and we can keep that group to 20 points or less, we are going to walk away with this national championship. And DRS, outside of Zach Edey, Purdue scored 23 points last night. The second best three-point shooting team in the country at 40.6%. At a certain point this year, at 41% from deep, attempted only 7 threes last night, and they made 1. The 7 attempted long balls from Purdue last night, the fewest in a national championship game in nearly 30 years since UCLA in 1995.
Always say it, the ultimate equalizer on the college basketball court is the ability to shoot and make three-point shots. Purdue was wonderful at that this year, over 40% as a team. That is absolutely incredible, and they had a very good shooting tournament overall. But the one thing that you anticipated coming into yesterday, I actually thought Clingan would do a better job on Edey. Again, holding him to around 20 points or so. But when you're trying to focus in and say, all right, what was Edey going to do if he wasn't double-teamed? Well, that means everybody else is going to have to work harder, and those three-point shots weren't going to be open. To take 7 of them, that's incredible, though, to take only 7, especially when you're losing by double digits throughout the entirety of the second half. The looks just weren't there and saying, look, you take 2s, that's fine, you can't catch up. Because how do you catch up? 3 straight trips down the court, 3 straight three-point shots, and away you go. Also, I do want to bring this up. The start of the second half, Ben, Clingan has 1 foul. Right away, he picks up his 2nd foul. And if you notice, the very next time down court, you saw them banging down low, Clingan and also Edey. It looked like it could have been his 3rd foul, wasn't called. Could have been a game changer. He was still under double digits, but just the factor of how well they played. And also, I thought the refs did a pretty good job on both big guys there. We wanted to see them play. And also, if Edey was getting fouled more, he didn't show it. He was converting every single hook shot like he was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar out there. I loved watching it all the way through. But just having said that, the way that UConn said, all right, Edey, you get yours, nobody else is going to beat us. That's where you need somebody on Purdue to step up and say, I don't care if you're double-teaming him or single-teaming him. I'm going to beat my guy. I'm going to make my shots. Nobody could do that on Purdue.
And let's not mince words. Our first attention, our first focus last night was on the big man battle between the 7'4" Zach Edey and the 7'2" Donovan Clingan. Early in the basketball game, really through the duration of the 40 minutes when they were both out there, Zach Edey had Clingan's number. There was no mistake about that. But that was okay for Connecticut. It's why they did not double, and it's one of the matchups we broke down yesterday with our coach, James Young. Oftentimes, one of the reasons Purdue is so good at shooting the 3 is because they crash on Edey. He kicks out to an open shooter. They move the ball around, and they get a great three-point opportunity. Not the case last night, as they relied on Donovan Clingan to guard Zach Edey. Now for Connecticut, a very different story. You knew Zach Edey was baked in for 25-plus points. But one of the strengths of Connecticut is its depth and its talent. Tristan Newton, for a 2nd consecutive year for Connecticut in a national championship game, is the Huskies' leading scorer. 20 points, 7 dimes, 5 rebounds last night. He does it all for UConn, and it's why he ended up as the Final Four's most outstanding player.
Yeah, he was very good. And again, you need running mates out here. Zach Edey technically didn't get one. UConn gave a couple running mates out there, double digits by Clingan. Obviously, you had Castle at 15 and also Newton at 20 points, and then Spencer chipped in for 11. And granted, you didn't say, boy, hopefully one of those guys gets 25 or 30 here. You didn't need it because you held Purdue to 60 points overall, so you really didn't need that offensive push. But it was great to watch it play out where everything was even distributed. Look at the 3 guys, 6 of 13, 6 of 13, and 5 and 12. Spencer, Newton, and Castle really were able to control the tempo up top. I was thoroughly impressed for UConn because, again, there's the original premise of UConn can play at any tempo and any style. They did that last night. There was no need to rush anything. They played great defense. The game plan installed by Hurley was genius. Let Edey get his. I don't think anybody else can really come over the top and get 20-plus points to carry them here. So it was a perfection night here for UConn. 6 straight wins, all by double digits. Incredible stuff to watch you play on the court, Ben.
The flexibility of it all. Look at the freshman Steph Castle. Stephon Castle in the Elite 8 shut down Terrence Shannon Jr., one of the elite scorers in college hoops. But he only had 2 points. Then he responds in his first ever Final Four as the game's leading, or at least for UConn, the team's leading scorer, 21 points. He has a quiet 15 last night, 5 rebounds, and 3 dimes. The reason we included all of those stats is because everybody for Dan Hurley's Huskies contributes in a variety of facets on a basketball floor. Tristan Newton named the tournament's most outstanding player entering the tournament title game. It was plus 650. It is a Final Four award. So where is Connecticut? In the grand scheme, in the pantheon of college basketball? We'll detail that next as we look forward already to next season, live right here on the Early Line. A 2nd consecutive national championship in Storrs, Connecticut for Dan Hurley's Huskies. A magical and dominant 2-year run in the NCAA tournament. 12 games, 12 wins. 12 covers, an average margin of victory of better than 22 points per game, an average cover margin over the past 2 NCAA tournaments of 12.5 points per game. Here in 2024, the highest point differential in a positive manner we have ever seen, plus 1 40. The average margin of victory this year, even better than a season ago in a national championship run. All 12 wins by at least 13 points, including their second consecutive national championship over the Boilermakers of Purdue by 15 points, 75-60, and DRS yet another cover, laying 6.5 pregame, and went under, did UConn, in all 6 games in the 2024 men's NCAA tournament.
Yeah,
We said I was going. Go ahead, please.
I was going to say, sometimes we just get caught up in some thoughts with, Purdue and UConn overall, how that game was going to play out, and just not overcomplicating the picture.
Right.
If UConn was going to win yesterday, I know we had a couple reels out there, which is great, which made me look smart.
Yeah.
Hey, look, if you like UConn, they're going to win by double digits, and they did that. But I can see some people out there saying, you know what? Look at Purdue, though. They haven't lost many games. When they lost games, it's really close, and Zach Edey is dominant. Anything can happen in one game, so you sort of buy into it. But UConn, just that same notion. If you just said yesterday, hey, I'm not handicapping the game. UConn kills everybody.
Yeah.
Well, that's a terrible way. You didn't look at the numbers.
Right.
It worked out in their way, in spades.
It is really fascinating, right? Purdue entered the game yesterday as an underdog only 2 times this year, and they won outright in both on the road against Illinois in early March to clinch their second consecutive Big Ten regular season crown, and in the middle of December against Arizona. That's a Sweet 16 team, an Elite 8 team in the Illini for Purdue in terms of their underdog standards. They were 5-2 against the spread as a dog in the last 2 years. Again, good at covering numbers. Was there ever a matchup advantage for anybody else in the 67 other teams in this year's field of 68 that could even keep it close enough to cover a spread against UConn? The ultimate answer is no. And it is interesting from the handicapping perspective because it almost feels too easy. All right, how do I get creative? UConn's not going to cover for a 12th consecutive game. The sample size might be there, but a trend has to stop at a certain point. And it just kept going and going and going. It's why when we saw UConn up by 6 at the break, 36-30, in a live spread at the half, DRS was 8 and a hook. I asked the guys on Sports Grid's Bracket Central coverage, is this truly a 6-point game? Or is UConn going to win by double digits, as this live number is alluding to? And that's what we saw once again. All 12 wins in the past 2 NCAA tournaments by at least 13 points. All 6 wins in 2024 by at least 14. A 14-point win in the Final Four on Saturday night against the Crimson Tide, a 15-point margin of victory in the national championship against the Boilermakers.
And fun to watch it play out, too. And also take a look at Purdue. You start that second half, and it's 6 points. And you said the 6-point really felt already like double digits. But you would have had a chance here to go in and say, you know what? It's 6 points. How about at the first time out, we make it 4 points? How about around 10 minutes, we make it a tie game? You didn't need them all back at once here, and it went the complete opposite direction. UConn came right out and forced themselves, got up double digits, and it was never looking back here. And you would have loved to have seen that adversity late in a close game down the stretch, and we could have got angry probably at a missed call or maybe a call that wasn't made. It wasn't the case here. Why? Because UConn just so dominant in that motion. They went into the halftime. And also, I got to give credit to Hurley as well. You're taking a look at a guy that every time it felt like they called a timeout, they came in with an easy bucket on the opposite end. Those are the things that separate the good coaches from the great coaches here. In the big moments here, getting your team easy baskets against a quality opponent, UConn did it all night long.
Connecticut in the Final Four trailed Alabama for the most minutes they had in the entirety of the tournament in those opening 20. They were only up by 4 at the break. They end up winning by 14 and covering as a 10.5-point favorite. Take last night's game, for example. About the 8-minute mark, Purdue and Zach Edey get a bucket. They take a 23-21 lead. The offensive pace was up. From that point, UConn goes on a 20-9 run into the opening few minutes of the first half, and they had a 9-point lead, and then it just felt like, all right, this game is already done. Even though it could be competitive down the stretch, you never really truly are able to weasel your way into a close game against UConn. So let's focus on this Huskies group, because now we have seen the first back-to-back national champions in men's college basketball for the first time since 06 and 07. As I said at the start of this opening hour of the early line, they have won 6 national championships in program history. That ties for the 3rd most all-time in the history of college basketball. UCLA with 10 of the 11 under John Wooden, 8 by Kentucky, a lot of those in the early years of Rupp Arena, and tied alongside now for UConn at 6 with North Carolina. But the difference, DRS, is all 6 national titles for Connecticut have come in the last 25 years. since 1999. How do you evaluate the scope of where Connecticut is as a blue blood, as one of the premier programs in college basketball?
Yeah, when we take a look at the blue blood status overall, right, we usually think about old school programs, winning in the 40s, winning in the 50s, winning in the 60s, 70s, until nowadays, which is why we take a look at the true blue blood, let's just say Kentucky.
Right.
All those championships you talk about under Adolph Rupp back in the day, and it sort of went over to Pitino and Tubby Smith, and that's a valid program today, and also Calipari getting the last one about a decade ago. But from UConn's perspective, this is the kids' blue blood program.
Yeah.
I was in college watching that 1999 championship. Oh, wow, UConn got one. They've been good for a couple of years, making Final Four runs, Elite Eights under Calhoun, but now finally punching their ticket. But to say that, it almost sneaks up on you, because when you talk about the great programs in basketball, it should be UConn, but they sort of don't come up, even though the most dominant program by a wide margin over the past 25 years. Now, you're looking at them now. They have the coach that now is a superstar and looks like he's going to be there long term. Now, I know later in the show we're going to talk about some other openings out there, but Hurley said after the game, look, I'm not going in the transfer portal. I love what I have here. And we talked about it yesterday on Moneyline, both myself and Kevin, on where Hurley might wind up. And he'd be crazy to leave. They're going to build a statue for that guy out front. But also, it's Storrs, Connecticut. It's not a major, L.A. or it's Miami or it's a, Chapel Hill where Michael Jordan played there, Duke and Cameron Indoor.
Right.
This is Storrs, Connecticut. He turned into an absolute powerhouse once again. And also, sometimes to do it, you had the two under Calhoun, the two under Ollie, and now the two under him. They do it under multiple coaches here.
Yeah, it is. It is insane, really, when you think about what they have done. And it's been a very interesting last 25 NCAA tournaments for UConn. I'm sure you've seen this stat in following the national championship game last night. They've actually missed the NCAA tournament more in the last 25 big dances than they have won national championships. They've missed it 8 times. That's 32% of the tournaments. But they have also won the title 6 times. That is 24% of the NCAA tournament. And Dan Hurley in 2020 said in his second or third year at the helm in Storrs, get us now because I promise you big things are coming. And he was correct. But in his first 2 years, they didn't get to the NCAA tournament. Of course, 2020, there was no big dance. In 2021, bounced in the round of 64. In 2022, bounced in the round of 64. To follow that up with 12 straight wins over the past 2 NCAA tournaments and 2 consecutive national champions. You talk about just turning the narrative on its head. Connecticut has accomplished that. And I will say this. The blue bloods in the sport are Kentucky, Carolina, Duke, Kansas. And we have seen those programs win a national championship in the last 25 years. Kentucky's got one under John Calipari in 2012. Kansas won just a few years ago. They've got 2 under Bill Self since 2008. North Carolina has 3 since 1999. Duke has 3 since that juncture as well under Mike Krzyzewski. But nobody has more than Connecticut. In fact, UConn has double the number of everybody else in college basketball. All 6 national championships for UConn have come since 1999. So are they a new blood? Are they a blue blood? What I will say is they are at the pantheon of college basketball. And maybe there's not the history and the tradition and the pageantry behind Connecticut in some thought of the term, but they are right there right now as the premier college basketball program along the biggest lights that you will see in Lexington and Chapel Hill and Durham, etc.
Blue blood, new blood, and you take a look at true blood now here for UConn. The reason why I bring that up is you have these debates, right, in the NBA. Michael Jordan and LeBron James. I love the point you just brought up because if you're a big game hunter, right, Michael Jordan gets to the finals, 6 straight finals wins, 6-0. How about UConn? Every time they got to the final, perfect 6-0 here. So whether or not they're winning during the season or missing it, you know you're going to get UConn's best shot. When the rubber meets the road, they are ready to attack. It's 6-0 in 25 years. Not, hey, we got the championship 12 times. We won 6 of them. We're 6-6. We're a great program. No, when they get there, they mean business, and they win every single time. That's incredible.
It is crazy as well because UConn since 1999 has won 6 national championships, but this year in 2023-24 was their first Big East regular season title since 1999. They were in the AAC for a little bit of time as well. Now let's pay it to Purdue just quickly here. because it was the redemption tour all year long. Upset by Fairleigh Dickinson, the 16 seed, as they won a season ago. How would they respond? Not just in the round of 64, but could this Boilermaker group that we had not seen reach a Final Four since 1980 for a proud and storied program in West Lafayette, could this be the team to change the narrative and to flip it completely on its head? And Purdue was able to accomplish that. Their second ever national championship game in program history, their first in 55 years since 1969. Yes, they lost by 15 in a national championship game and did not look particularly good outside of Zach Edey. But this Purdue team, DRS, will be remembered in West Lafayette for many, many years to come. In fact, forever.
And they should. And quite frankly, you never probably thought this day would come in the 80s and 90s and the 70s where Indiana was the premier program in the state here. Now it's Purdue. Purdue is the premier program here because of guys like Zach Edey, Matt Painter as a coach. They did a great job this year. No shame in their game for getting to the final and losing to UConn.
Absolutely so. And we believed it for a very long time, even though Purdue was the butt of the joke. They get the last laugh into a national championship game. But UConn stands atop the hill of college basketball once more.